million revenue run rate. And so there's a lot of stuff that we do. But those are pretty good survivorship stats. We're technology investors with a focus on enterprise. I think when we started, we were about 50% consumer, 50% enterprise. Today, we're about 95% enterprise. Our latest fund, our seventh fund, is going to be focused on the rejuvenation of the US energy and manufacturing sectors. We think there's a really interesting series of AI-related solutions can be applied there, whether it's through software or through hardware. So we've made investments in drones and robotics for over a dozen years. Yeah.
Thank you for the introduction, John. So just to kind of get us started, so Metapilot Academy is a relatively new MBA program. Dana is also one of the board members here. Some people are new, some people are interested in this call, but the main focus of the Academy is the intersection of aerospace, defense, mobility, space. So we're launching now a new module where we're discussing the investment landscape and entrepreneurship, which you nicely alluded to, or at least partially, when you mentioned the future of manufacturing. And yeah, I mean, it's great to have an introduction from you, just thinking, in terms of the future of aerospace, where you see this going. We always say, obviously, there's been a lot of investment in defense and AI. We've seen the recent visit from the US government into the Middle East, from Qatar, from Saudi, from Emirates. There's been almost a $3 trillion investment. And then also now with NATO countries committing 5% of their GDP to defense. Where do you see yourself in that? Are venture funds interested in the dual use? Do you also think that there's so much more than just the dual use, maybe going into space, into mobility, into robotics, machine learning, AI agents, all that stuff? So yeah, I know it's not an easy thing to answer, but just to kind of get us started.
So prior to FF Venture Capital, I was at Goldman Sachs. I was there for 21 years. And the last 11 years, I was on the sales and trading floor as an equity research salesperson covering hedge funds. A lot of macro players. I covered Druckenmiller, Shopcorn, a whole bunch of New York-based hedge funds. And so I have an appreciation for both the macro and the markets and the micro and specific companies. So when I think about this, I start with the macro. And the macro here for me is the biggest macro driver is post-World War II, the US, who was victorious, could have said, like most victors, the people who lost have to pay money. They have to respect that the US has won this war and pay back the US. This is what happened after the First World War, and we saw the problems it caused in Germany. The US took a different lesson, and they said, we're going to open our markets to everybody, and you don't need an army and a navy. We're going to keep all of the trade routes open. And I think the Germans and Japanese looked at each other and said, well, that's kind of what we wanted to do if we won. We wanted access to the US market. But nevertheless, we had the Bretton Woods Accords and all of these pan-national institutions that were set up. For whatever reason, that is unwinding, and it's irrespective of administrations in Europe, in the US, etc. And we're moving now to a multipolar world. And so that's the first thing to understand. And that completely changed the dynamics. It changed the dynamics because now it's becoming a more transactional world. We're seeing this with tariffs and the like. And so each country needs to respond differently. Germany was set up as a manufacturing hub for export, and that's being very challenged now. China's similarly. And so you're going to have a lot more regional differences, regional conflicts. There's definitely I think we've seen peak global supply chains. I think we're going to see much more local supply chains. I mean, the people who are saying, I'm taking my production out of China and I'm moving it to Vietnam are missing. That'll work for a while, and then that won't work. And I think you're going to see much tighter supply chain. What this does, it completely changes how we look at manufacturing. So, I'm sorry if I'm giving you a long-winded response, but this is the frame. This is the frame.
I'm very happy with that response.
So if you think about it, 30 years ago, you manufactured a product, 60% of the cost was labor, and labor was 1/10 the price the other side of the world. There was a huge arbitrage.
Yeah.
Over time, that arbitrage went away because now labor costs are 20%,
yeah,
and the price difference is, say, 50%. And so things like shipping costs and national security and security of supply chains, these kinds of things can get in the way. So there's a need, from the US to bring manufacturing back to the US. Likewise in Europe, the dependence on countries that you may not be friendly with is also coming to the front, and the reliance on China is coming to the front, and one has to think through all of those dynamics. So I think we have this change that's happening, and so when you think about manufacturing generally, when it's coming back locally, are you going to take the same processes and procedures that were done over these stretched out supply chains and take the same process that was being done, say, in China and bring it back to Germany or bring it back to the US? Or are you going to look at that and say, how do we do that better? People use manufacturing 4.0. It doesn't really matter whatever language you use. But do you take completely different methodology to get to the end solution that you want? Now, let me give you an analogy there. If you look at getting payload to space, it's very expensive. Elon Musk comes along and looks at it orthogonally. Now, NASA has very bright people and a large budget. I mean, they're literally rocket scientists working at NASA. Yet, Musk comes in with an orthogonal way of looking at it, which involves a lot of simplification approach and gets costs down by 1, 2, 3 orders of magnitude. And accordingly today, what is it? 95% of payload to space is on SpaceX. Now, we know that China has probably copied technology. They've started landing rockets. I saw yesterday Honda, I didn't know it was in the rocket business, landed a rocket.
Yep.
So this technology, is getting diverse, and people are going to work out lots of different solutions. Once they start thinking this differently, you will have this Cambrian explosion.
Yep.
Companies going after this. The traditional way, let's say you want to make a toy. Your traditional thing was you go to China, you get molds produced, the big cost for that mold, and then they run each individual item. Well, the US toy company, which has little plastic things with movable legs and shapes of creatures or whatever they are, and there's like 150 of them. very expensive with the traditional approach. They said, we'll 3D print it. So everything's 3D printed, no mold costs, no packaging. It gets shipped in a big drum to the toy store, and the kids work out which of them, and they're all different colors and different shapes. And so the collectible thing, and the kids want to own all 150 and whatever it is. It's an orthogonal approach to solving a solution of kids' toys and avoiding, not replicating that process. So I think you will have, and I'll use the term again, a Cambrian explosion of different ways, different processes to generate end solutions in both manufacturing and energy.
Yeah.
The manufacturing side is just, phenomenally interesting to us. We believe there's going to be places for people to invest in real estate, in private equity, in debt, all the way across the board, but there'll be this venture capital slice. Yeah, and the same with energy. With energy, there's just tremendous stuff coming over. Now, people will say, how on earth do you replace this whole supply chain? It's really, really difficult. And the answer is, it's really, really difficult. It will take time, but people will do it. There's a need. We have an investment in a company that's building jet engine powered drones. They're about 2 foot by 2 foot, and it will be, the supply chain will be US all the way down. Mm-hmm. They will work out how to do it. They'll build the pieces, they'll 3D print stuff, etc. I mean, 3D printing to me is fascinating. I think it was a great hobbyist tool when it first came out, and there was a whole wave of investment. And to me, at the early stage, I'd like, well, everyone will have a 3D printer at home. I'm like, well, everybody could have a kiln at home and create their own crockery, but they're just not going to do that.
Exactly.
However, at the moment, I think we're going to see a renaissance. You've got different materials, different speed of being able to do it. Things will happen. And so you look at the complexity of a supply chain in China and you go, that just can't happen. But it's going to be done slowly. It's going to be done product by product. And over time, you will be able to replace some of the complexity. Certainly for critical elements.
Right. So that was that. What was the week before that?
So someone needs to mute out because we're getting a little background noise.
No worries. Warren, I see you've been writing quite a few things, and then Dana, I'd love to get your comments, guys. I have like a burning question about robotics, right? Because if we're going to have manufacturing mostly in the US or Europe, the question is, will this be done by humans, or will be done mostly by robots? Will we be training the robots? What's worth investing? But I'll start with Warren, just putting that in the background.
Yeah, now I know why I'm invited to this meeting. This is my first meeting with the group. And so my experience in supply chain manufacturing with Interos, specifically as it relates to China, raw materials and explosives and the batteries and stuff, makes sense. And John, you and I could probably have a 10-hour lunch together talking about all this stuff. And also, I got so into kind of the Gen AI aspect of things with it that, I applied and got accepted to MIT to pursue an engineering degree. So I have marketing and MBAs and stuff, and I have a little bit of programming experience, enough to get into MIT. But it's been, I'm about a year in. I just finished, my second full semester there, and so it's really great. But so anyway, you mentioned robotics. So MIT is interesting in that it largely focuses on the hard science. My whole background is software and, building SaaS platforms, for enterprises. And MIT focuses on the hard science. And the hard science to them is things like robotics and energy. And so, everyone I hang around with up there, someone mentioned they're hanging out in Boston. I assume it's probably for the same reason. but it's all about robotics and energy, and it's a very, very new field in both of those. I mean, they're old, mature markets, but like the innovation there is going a whole nother level as it relates to AI and robotics, and how you can ingest a bunch of data around thermal energy to to have the right, IoTs to monitor, the wave functions going up and down in the ocean, or the exact heat coming from the center of the earth kind of thing. And it's really interesting. So there's a lot of investment opportunities. And I only can speak of the ones in Boston, let alone, all over the, West Coast and in Europe too. So it's interesting, a lot of opportunity there. I don't know what angle this team wants to go, but I could speak at length about any of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's kind of interesting where we are right now. So if you think about the number of high IQ people who are working on hard engineering related problems, there's a certain number, right? Pick a number. Let's say it's 100, just because I can work with simple numbers, right? 100 is probably as high as it's ever been. If you went back 20 years, it was probably 50, and you go back, etc. If you believe that AI is going to be able to address a lot of these problems, 100 is now going to become 10 million. You're going to have this just explosion of capability of intellectual power that can be applied at a relatively low cost to all of these engineering problems, etc. we have. And so that will commoditize a lot of things that before took a long time to solve, took a lot of interaction back and forth. You'll be able to run simulations to come up with solutions. And it's not just both. I mean, in the medical field, I'm very optimistic about problems we're going to solve that we feel like we're just sort of beginning to get our heads around. So that's fascinating. That's a complete change in the landscape. And that, that will enable us to do a lot of stuff. When I say us, there will be lots of individuals who will start companies to do this or do that, etc. And you stack them together, and suddenly you have, part of your supply chain done in a way that was difficult before. So going back in history, took a long time to build supply chains. I don't know what it's going to take in the future. I think it's going to be much faster. Yeah. And with robotics are fascinating to me. I do believe that the mechanics of robotics are getting solved really fast right now. And then what will happen is the instruction set will become more and more meta, to the point that you will say, go and do that, as you would say to a human, and it will go and do that.
With fewer mistakes.
I agree with that.
Dana, did you want to add something?
Yeah. So I'm blown away by a number of things. One is that it is always very refreshing when people talk about change in environment, change in thinking, and they equate it to intellectual power. And I say this because, so a little bit about me. I've lived in a number of countries. Originally I'm from Iran. I was born there until the revolution. And I came to live in Germany and then the States. So I'm implanted in the States for the last almost 40 years. So in my background is very diverse, biology, art history, political science, peace and conflict studies, and human resources. So And for the last 16 years, I worked for Oracle in managing their global HR program, global mobility specifically. With that said, my interests are quite diverse. And so this is what I would say in terms of the role of human in today and the future world. I think in the States, in some ways, we're behind, and only from a perspective of personnel management, cultivating, developing, acknowledging experience and intellectuality go together. Experience must change, education must change, and it hasn't. So quite often I talk about upskill, right? So you have individuals have very specific technical skills, supply chain management, manufacturing, but when the environment is changing and those skills are not adjusting and changing, you create redundancies and you create overlaps of skills that no longer are in use, no longer can be used. Instead of adjusting for that, we dumb it down and we create fear of technology, fear of AI. So today there is a school such as what you've beautifully outlined, John, that talks about it's coming, it's here. Either we, understand it, capture it, view it, acknowledge it, and move with it. And what I would say, or you're left behind. So what I see with Metapilot and technology similar, AI mimics human mind. And to me is that if you put the rocket scientists that have a well-rounded knowledge, which is, it's like a Rubik's Cube, you're aligning the colors to create the kind of a spherical knowledge of anything. Then what AI is going to be doing is mimicking the mind of the person. Again, I tell you to do it my way, and then you do it my way. So that to me, I find that very, very fascinating. The other piece that I would say is that in terms of the technology, I mean, you were talking about 3D printing. That has been in place in medical field for a very long time. Dentists have been using it to make crowns in their office for, I would say, probably 20 years. My husband has had one, which is now in the basement somewhere, for at least the last 15 years, and he was making things, toys, whatever he wanted with it. So I think it's again, it's the next level, and creating these pipelines. One, from an education and upskill perspective. Two is understanding the environment from business perspective, and also environment impact and how AI can support changes in the environment. I mean, Diana and I have been talking about the role of the Metapilot Academy and the technology behind it in supporting some of the environmental changes. So for example, I gave the example to Diana about the fires in California. I was there, we had to evacuate. And one of the things that I found so fascinating, and I was taking video of this, where these planes with pilots in them flying into the ocean, picking up water, flying over the mountains and just dropping it in the fire. Well, why? Why can't this be done? You were talking about, I tell it to do it and it will do it, where we know these fires happening. It's like you can plan for it.
The fire hydrants could have worked as well if it actually.
Well, that is stupidity, right? So this is where I go back to, we are stupefying versus growing with the best of us, if you will, right? So I think it's almost like we need to rise above some of this dumbing down of everything and politicking. I think that I just don't have time in my mind. My brain has enough space just for this stuff. I don't have time for the rest. But I think there is a lot happening that we just need to put it on the board and actually put it in pipelines. Maybe it's not all at one time. Maybe it's sequential. Maybe some things can be done in parallel. I just think that we are at the tipping point. And I think about the technologies that support AI and future of life support as something as simple as a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah. So look, the Luddite argument is very seductive. Every wave of technology, people come along and say, I can see all these jobs being destroyed. I can see all this thing being taken away. I can't see what comes in. And yet, somehow, new jobs are created. So I just went over to my drawer to get this. I don't know if you recognize what this is.
It looks like a ruler from the distance.
Doesn't it? It's got the slides.
Okay, right.
It's a slide rule.
Okay, yes.
When I was a kid in school, I would use this to do calculations.
Yes.
And I have actually forgotten how to use my slide rule. But it's a piece of technology. I put the human knowledge on top, and I can do very powerful things with the slide rule.
Yes.
The same thing with AI. Same thing with a calculator.
Yes.
Same thing with any piece of technology. You have just and the thing is, it's moving so rapidly right now, we're not really sure where the boundaries are and how to fit this in.
Yeah.
You know, most prior technology waves, they kind of came in and it took time to adopt, but what you knew on a Monday was relevant for like 3-4 years. Now what you know on a Monday may not be relevant on a Tuesday.
Precisely.
However, I think of AI tools today that it's like having a really good intern. I have a research project. I give an intern 3-4 weeks. They come back and I get something that's like 80% done. Or I can hand it over to AI and it comes back to me and it's 80% done. Now, it's easy to say, well, next year it'll be 90 or 95% or 100% done. And I think that's going to be increasingly difficult. It may do, but I think you need to invent some new things to make that work. I think there are limits. It's not just scaling of size of data centers, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, but sorry, just to interrupt you.
My expectation that you need human to augment it. And I think the reasons why Apple has delayed rolling out this AI and putting it in hands of everybody is because someone with an 80 IQ could probably do a lot of self-harm with this kind of.
Yes.
Whereas someone, with 110 IQ has enough to really understand the limitations. And at a societal level, it has become very clear how tribal people are and how people are willing to outsource their thinking to media. Yeah. And that is a little worrisome because your own AI is like your own media. And if you I've been plagued by just thinking about things from first principles throughout my life. Mm-hmm. And it shocks me that other people don't, but I have to recognize a lot of other people don't. These tools are really helpful in the hands of people who think from first principles, who have, for want of a better term, agency.
Yeah.
And they can be dangerous in the hands of people who don't. Mm-hmm. And so, that's something we need to think about. But I'm not worried about jobs. We will just find where within this the wisdom is, the human element, the piece that naturally works for us fits in.
Yeah, so let me just preface this by saying that What I'm really worried about is, as we say, AI mimics. If it's mimicking very linear thinkers, what you get is a very linear response, a very linear perspective. I think what is really important, and this is, and again, I'm speaking from the perspective of emotional intelligence and watching people over my career. I'm working for defense, technology, consulting, automotive. What I will tell you is that if the education doesn't work in parallel with the technology, what you will end up is stupid people operating very smart technology. And sorry to oversimplify it, but
you're absolutely right. There are major issues with regard to how education handles this or mishandles it. How people, who are embedded in this, the kinds of problems we throw at kids in high school and university are the kinds of problems AI can solve. But the problem is, what you're meant to get out of high school and university is working out how to think and how to solve problems. And if you outsource that in those formative years, I'm worried. So we take a whole thread on education, and I don't, I want to be respectful to the agenda here, but it is moving very fast. Institutions move very slow. Here's what I'll tell you, trying to bring this back to the agenda a little bit. We have found in the last 9 months, our portfolio companies are using these AI solutions, and we call them AI point solutions, or APES. They're using them to help in legal, in marketing, obviously engineering, training, recruiting. That's why we call them point solutions. All different parts of the organization. They're taking out 10, 20, 30, 40% of costs. We got a company growing 40%, and other than sales, they're not adding any net headcount. They are moving at this fastest speed possible because they're small organizations. Large organizations, I think, will take longer, because I think they're more ossified. I have this phrase that large organizations are stupid, and the larger they are, the more stupid they are. They just find it very difficult to get out of their own way. And smaller organizations have the advantage. And what happens is the advantage allows them to stay smaller for longer. And so the teams are faster moving, etc. So that's a dynamic that we're seeing within companies. And I think it will very much change how startups are formed, how startups are run, eventually how all companies are run. But my expectation is, if we stopped with the technology we have today, there's 5 to 10 years of efficiency, maybe 15, 20 years of efficiency to work through the whole system. And so it will be fascinating on how all of this develops. And, for me as an investor, I'm fascinated by thinking through where the points of commoditization are, and where the points of differentiation are. Where are the barriers to entry? Where's the money to be made? And I think a lot of people are very confused in this space, and I think there's a lot of capital pouring in. So it's a fascinating time. As we talk about manufacturing and robotics, huge opportunity. As we talk about energy infrastructure, I also think huge opportunity. I think energy infrastructure is ossified with regard to how they look at what they do. And, you know, I think it changed the nature of work. Work has been an apprenticeship model for a long time. It takes a long time to pick up the underlying knowledge and language. And I think that those entry-level roles that we've had in the past will be different now.
Yeah.
If you can come in and work with the AI to find the right solutions. But again, I have problems. I worry that the way the education system is set up, we're not training people to be with agency and to think about it. Our companies have stopped hiring people just with skills. They're hiring people with skills, plus, again, I've used this term like 4 times, agency. What do I mean by agency? It's the person who comes in and looks at their job and goes, I can automate this piece, this piece, this piece. I can take a 50-hour work week and collapse it down to 10 or 5. And then I'm going to go to the person I work for and say, the firm has recovered 45 hours. I think in some companies, you're going to find that people come in, they take a 50-hour work week, collapse it to 5, and they don't tell anyone. And they're working remotely, and so they do 10 jobs.
Yes.
Yeah, or they walk the dog and go to the gym or whatever. But so people with agency and skills and know how to use these tools will do very well. But now you've got a Venn diagrams intersection of the 3 pieces. We need to find out how we can make that work. I do not believe jobs go away. I don't know any startup who says I've got 10 engineers and if I can make each of them 10 times more efficient, I'll go to 1 engineer.
Yeah.
What they say is I will get 10 times the work done. My product will get much more sophisticated. I'll address customer needs much better. And I'll be able to charge more and do more. So, people have heard Chevron's paradox because it was in the mainstream before. But as you reduce the price of something, demand can often go up.
Yeah.
I'll give you a silly example. We have a last mile drone delivery company called Manna. They're in Ireland and Finland at the moment, and there'll be more countries over the next couple of years. Half of their deliveries are coffee. You wouldn't you wouldn't go on Uber Eats to order a coffee and have someone drive it to you, but you will with a drone because the price is cheaper and the coffee gets to you hot, and you don't have to go out in the weather and line up at Starbucks for it. And so, as price points come down, whole different markets open up. And so, this notion that all these jobs are going to disappear, I don't think happens. I think we just get more stuff done. And I think it's an exciting world to be in for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bring us back to agenda because I can talk for hours.
Please do. I mean, this has been, I definitely feel smarter again after this discussion. I don't know why I'm so lucky. It always happens, and not just with you, John, but also Dana, Warren, and everyone else. Going back to what you said, that, we can get to a point where we just speak to an AI agent and tell them, well, so flying cars are launching in the US this year, build me 500 manufacturing sites and build them in this and that way. You'll probably do it with fewer issues than human beings. But as I was working on the platform the other day, I was working with GitHub Copilot, and I realized the only reason why this thing isn't coding itself by now and isn't fixing its own code with me just talking to it, through the microphone, is compute. Really, it's just the size of the game is enormous, so it really cannot hold the entire thing, even in its highest version. And it's probably the same with 1,000 manufacturing sites. So it's possible that if we solve the compute problem, we will just have humans in the loop that kind of push the algorithm in the right way. I was kayaking in Bali a while ago, and we actually had a person from Bali. Every time our boat was getting stuck in a waterfall, he was just coming out of the boat and then pushing the boat back onto the stream. So that's kind of how I see humans in the loop. And in the long run. But yeah, great points. And yeah, please read the Communist Manifesto again. It's actually like a a positive outlook of how this can go. Any thoughts? Any closing thoughts? Anyone? You're processing. Okay. Well, thank you so much for your time, everyone. I don't want to take any more of it, but I do hope to see you all again, and we're gonna think about all of this and follow up with each of you. Thank you so much.
I'm going to leave you with one thought.
Mhm.
I used to tell people it's amazing. This is the sum of human knowledge, and it's in everyone's hand. Poor people, rich people, they have access to knowledge. Now, whether they use it to pay video games or watch movies or code is up to them. But it's literally a supercomputer. You now have, sitting on top of the sum of human knowledge, PhD level intelligence. All of that basically for free or, de minimis amounts. I can't tell you how much that's going to change the world. It's going to change the world, and it is an enormous leveler. Name any billionaire, they don't have a better phone with better access to knowledge or intelligence. Same with poor people. And so it comes down to intelligence and drive and creativity, what you're going to do with that. And, what a great time to be alive, where you can see all of that. For sure.
Absolutely. And agency. Great points. There we go.
Thanks. Listen, this has been a lot of fun for me. I hope it's good interaction, lots of good questions I saw popping up here. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
A pleasure, John. Always nice to speak with very insightful people in venture capital. So
Thank you.
have a nice day. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Dana, Warren, everyone, Zach, Lawrence.